Would you help a person in need, even if their backstory was a bit shaky in places? Or on the opposite end, how desperate would you need to be in order to seek help from a shady stranger? These are the problems our characters will be facing as they meet one another. But who is telling the truth and who has ill intent? Or perhaps both are genuinely friendly and we're overthinking the whole situation. Well, let's see if we can suss out the guilty party between the two and survive whatever it is they have in store as we see how to beat You'll Never Find Me. Our film opens on a man named Patrick sitting alone in his trailer, drinking away his sorrows during a dark and stormy outside. Suddenly there's a banging at his door, and despite bitterly telling the visitor to go away, they persist to knock until he answers. It's a young barefoot woman caught by the sudden downpour who asks if she may come in and for a lift into town. He at least gets her out from the cold and brings her a towel, but claims he can't drive her anywhere since his car is acting up. As the visitor asks about buses in the area, he remarks how they wouldn't be driving at 2 in the morning, much to the surprise of his guest here, who seems to have lost track of the time. That explains why he was so upset about the knocking, given the hour. He offers the girl to let her jacket dry on the heater, but when she states no intention of staying and could just use a phone to call a ride, he ignores her comments and simply insists until she accepts. Same for when he offers her a chair soon after, offering it again and again until she concedes. Could be a potential red flag, but could also just be an overly bearing kind person. Hard to truly tell at this point, but something important to keep in mind. As she removes her top, Patrick sees she has a swimsuit on underneath and comments about it, with her claiming she fell asleep at the beach. This would explain her being barefoot, as well as how a storm could catch her off guard at 2 a.m. Yet for some reason, Patrick seems perplexed by this response. As we will later find out, the beach is quite a long distance away from his trailer park, and the time of year is not ideal for swimming, unless you want to get hypothermia, that is. So the woman is sending some red flags of her own. After pouring the girl a drink and some light conversation, he gives her a few quarters for the payphone that's quite some distance away, as he apparently doesn't have a phone of his own. He offers to walk her to it in the morning, as the gates to the park are closed at this hour anyway, so no one can get in or out. Although if that's the case, how did she get here in the first place? Surely she must be able to walk around the gate somehow, right? Well, regardless, this visitor is ready to make her leave, but upon noticing how lonely the man seems to be, offers to at least stay until her shirt dries. Fairly kind of her, and a half-decent way of paying the man back for his generosity thus far. The two talk a bit about his past, where Patrick goes on a tangent from how getting nearly electrocuted at his job made it more enjoyable, and how fear and excitement to joy and danger can be interpreted as one and the same to humans. Yeah, okay, we're adding this conversation to the red flag pile. After that interesting speech, Patrick suggests the girl take a shower to warm up, as she's clearly shivering from the cold. Not sure how comfortable I would feel doing that in a stranger's home, especially after everything that's just been said, and although this girl seems to feel the same, she once again eventually accepts the offer after enough insisting. The bathroom door latch is missing, making this even more uncomfortable, and the woman stays in her bathing suit while cleaning up. Probably a good idea. Despite all her worries and uncomfortable feelings, however, Patrick doesn't mess with her throughout, only knocking and entering at one point to hang up a fresh towel. He honestly just seems like a good guy so far. Emphasis on the so far, however, as she comes out to check on her shirt and finds the heater isn't even turned on. Alright, this could be the biggest red flag of them all, or just an honest mistake, with Patrick simply forgetting to turn the device on. I say we bring it to his attention and see how he reacts. Worst case scenario, we flee into the night while we still can. Otherwise, he can realize his whoopsies and start the heater at this point. He does seem aware that the shirt isn't dry yet, however, as he offers her a sweater from an old girlfriend to put on for warmth, even telling her she can keep it, all while also making her a bowl of canned soup. This man is so generous. The woman is hesitant to start eating the food, however, I guess expecting it to be poisoned somehow, so she just pours it into the man's rain boots while his back is turned. Pretty rude, but I guess it's a good way to be better safe than sorry. It's understandable to be a little nervous about free food, with this being a total stranger and all, but I think if he was going to harm us, he would have done that by now. Also, we came to his residence in the middle of the night. so it would be strange for him to be at the ready to murder someone so unexpectedly. Of course, it doesn't hurt to be extra cautious, so not eating the soup is still the safer option here regardless. Suddenly the power goes out, and the only source of light available to the pair is a single flashlight Patrick has. He isn't sure if a fuse blew or the power lines are down, and claims he'd go out to check outside for himself, but he's a bit worried to put on his boots with all that soup in them. Realizing she's been caught, the woman apologizes profusely, but Patrick is quite chill about the whole ordeal and laughs it off. He not only reiterates it really was just ordinary soup, but also points out she's free to go whenever she wants. See? Good guy. As Patrick heads to a back room to check the fuse box, the girl feels silly for suspecting foul intentions from this kind person, so she decides to help out in order to make up for it. While doing so, however, she notices a hammer with blood on the end. That is, until a light is shined on the tool, revealing it to be perfectly ordinary. A trick of the light, perhaps. Well, she did think she saw blood earlier during the shower as well, but that turned out to just be dirt in the end. Maybe she's high on some drug or hallucinating. We don't really know anything about her to come to a conclusion yet, so it's hard to say if these are red flags or just misunderstandings. There is actually blood though, but it's on Patrick as she notices some scratches on his lower back and heads to get him a bandage for it. While searching the medicine cabinet, she notices a pill bottle filled with something other than pills and checks it to find several different earrings. But most shocking of all about this discovery is that one of the earrings is her own, which is now missing from her ear. If it truly is the same one, when and how did he get it? And why is he collecting them? Finally, having enough of these creepy moments, the girl voices that she wishes to leave, with Patrick claiming he'll take her to the phone once the storm is over and offering to play a game of cards in the meantime. But this isn't good enough for the visitor, as she repeats her desire to leave now and alone, asking for the key to the front door that she's certain he's locked. Patrick is hurt by her reactions after everything he's done to help, especially for a total stranger with a shaky backstory in the middle of the night. But his inquiring as to what he did so wrong or what she's actually doing all the way out here just leads to an angry outburst from the frightened woman as she demands the key once again. After a long, awkward silence, he gently reminds her that the door isn't locked, and never was. She can go whenever she likes. The woman opens the door to leave, but feeling ashamed at being such a lousy guest, returns to at least play a few rounds of cards with the man. Things are a bit tense after what just happened though, so Patrick clears the air by noticing she hasn't touched the drink that he gave her a while ago and claims he has a nice pair of shoes she can dump it into if she likes. This is enough to get a laugh out of her and a smile is shared between the two. Seems they're finally able to relax a bit around one another, but for how long I wonder, and which of them is going to ruin it. The pair play the game Bullshit, fittingly enough, where you have to guess if your opponent is lying about the cards they place face down on the table. During this time, they have a friendly conversation, and Patrick only just now introduces himself. Yeah, the film gave him no name until now. And guess what? They never give this girl a name. Guess we'll just keep calling her the Visitor for now. During their conversations, though, she slips up with her backstory a little, claiming she was drinking at a bar before the rain hit. After Patrick points out this discrepancy, she quickly backpedals a bit to explain she was drunk at the bar before the beach, and after that was caught in the rainstorm. Alright, sure, another red flag against her now. He calls her out on her BS, and by that I mean in the card game of course, but it obviously works for the context of their situation together as well, as he points out that it's too late at night and they're too far from the beach for her to make it here barefoot. Patrick knows she clearly lied about something, but apparently doesn't care. He's just happy to have the company. A very bittersweet situation. Finally letting her guard down some, the woman takes a sip of her drink, but after doing so, notices a lipstick mark on the edge of the glass. Strange, as Patrick is supposed to be alone. Before she can question this any further, the storm knocks something off the roof of the trailer and Patrick rushes out to check on whatever it was. While he's doing so, the girl notices a cell phone going off in the back, despite Patrick's claims of not owning one. I guess he technically didn't lie, however, as the girl finds out the phone belongs to another person, specifically the corpse of this young woman lying in his bed. So yeah, maybe he's not such a good guy after all. That's my bad. Hearing the man returning, the girl rushes to the back room and uses a step stool to try and reach the ceiling window for escape. After it proves to not budge, she attempts to use the hammer on it, but it's now back to having blood on its tip. So is she hallucinating or not? It's very hard to tell. Either way, she's not getting this window open, so she waits for Patrick to check his bedroom before sneaking past him and attempting to leave out the front door. To her horror, however, it is actually locked this time, and she finds out just as Patrick grabs her from behind. He wrestles her to the ground, binds her with duct tape, and forces the rest of her drink down her throat. Afterwards, he makes room in his bed by clearing out his previous guest, before dragging his latest visitor to her new accommodations. Thankfully, she's a fighter, so the second she gets a chance to, she starts figuring a way out. As Patrick sets up his previous victim for disposal, the girl uses the deceased person's car keys to cut the tape holding her and attempts to escape out the back window. Unfortunately, her hands soon fail to respond and go limp as the rest of her body follows suit. She attempts to crawl away despite having no place to go because she's a fighter till the bitter end, but Patrick doesn't even attempt to stop her, now that the drug is taking effect. He claims he gave her GHB, a prescription medicine that in low doses can keep you alert and euphoric, but in high doses can shut off muscle function and kill you. And of course, he claims he put a high dose within her drink. Guess he should have dumped it in his shoes after all. So why did he have a plan to poison her if she was an unexpected visitor? Well, same reason he murdered that previous victim in the bed, because they came to him. Apparently, he's done this to dozens of women before, but he never goes hunting for targets. Instead, he waits for people to bother intruding into his life, and takes that as a serendipitous sign to end them. His first victim was a girl who approached his vehicle and asked for a lift into town. The woman from the bed was met just earlier that day and approached him for a bag of chips to eat at the store. And now this visitor comes to his home in the middle of the night. He sees it as moths drawn to a flame, and he's the thing that burns them. Pretty messed up. Patrick does add though that he isn't sure how or why he's able to get away with it. He keeps expecting to see the lights flashing in his windows as sirens blaze, but it never happens, encouraging his persistence in these actions. He even moved to the outskirts of town and keeps to himself. Yet somehow, women keep showing up, so he keeps ending them. The visitor launches one final attempt to attack the man with a knife, but just doesn't have the strength to follow up with it fully and starts to succumb to the drug's effect. As she's slowly dying, he talks about how nothing stops you from doing these kinds of things except for that pesky little voice in your head known as a conscience. But if you can ignore the guilt, you can do anything. Pretty sad because that's pretty true. Not everyone bothers to feel empathy towards others, and the result is often misery for everyone. So on that bleak note, let's review things so far. Back before we knew Patrick was a psycho, when he first heard banging on his door at that late hour, he should have been more cautious about answering it. Check out the window first, or look through a peephole to make sure the person or persons on the other side aren't armed or dangerous. Now, given the context, it makes sense that it could be someone just looking for shelter instead of a late-night robber. But even still, it's good to be cautious when it comes to our home. Especially if we are on the outskirts of town as he claims, where help is less available. As for actually letting a stranger into our residence, that's a personal call for each of us to make based on the situation and how safe we feel doing so. I personally wouldn't let just anybody in on most nights unless it was a true emergency, but Patrick here is lonely and wants the company as well as another victim to add to the body count. As for the visitor, she should have left as soon as she learned his car didn't work. Money for a payphone is nice, but if we are willing to check out the first home we see and ask for a lift, I don't see why we can't just go to the next trailer and ask whoever lives there for a ride when we learn we won't be getting one here. It's nice to show the man kindness for his generosity, but that doesn't help us get home any sooner. And if we feel even slightly nervous or unsafe about being there, as the girl shows throughout, we should leave as quickly as possible for safety. The visitor was smart to not eat or drink what was provided to her, not just because they could be drugged, but simply because we don't know this person or how well they store or clean their supplies. Just generally unsafe to consume things from someone we don't know at all, and should only be done if necessary or confirmed safe by our own eyes. However, instead of revealing our distrust or caution of what's being offered by rudely dumping it somewhere, we can just insist we don't want any. If our host refuses to accept that response and keeps insisting, that's a red flag to avoid the snacks and get out. Last thing the visitor really could have done, other than just leave at any given time, was to use the cell phone as soon as she found it. Even if it was locked, law enforcement can still be contacted for just such an emergency. So once we notice that body, call the police immediately. And if Patrick returns like he does in the film, we should still call emergency service as we attempt to make our escape. The sooner we contact them, the sooner help will arrive. And we can use all the help we can get while alone in a murderous stranger's home. It's possible if she had done this, they would have been able to save her upon arrival. But of course she didn't. She let her guard down and didn't heed the stranger danger warnings, and now she's paying the ultimate price for it. After the death of this latest victim, Patrick goes to wrap things up when he hears the radio turn on. This is strange, of course, because the power is still out, but the song it plays unlocks a memory within the man as he thinks back to the time he ended his first victim, a woman caught in the rain at the beach, asking him for a ride. It's too much of a coincidence how similar that scenario is to his latest visitor here. So he looks at the woman's side to confirm what he already suspects, and to his horror finds that they have the exact same tattoo in the exact same spot. Of course, he ended that first lady with a hammer, not drugs. So he removes the blanket covering her face, but is shocked to find her head having a wound caused by a blunt object that is now in his hand and covered in blood. What exactly is happening here? Well, things get even stranger as despite the poisoning and/or bludgeoning, the visitor rises from the dead. This of course gives Patrick a bit of a fright as he stumbles backwards throughout his trailer. As he does so, he's confronted by all of his past victims around his home, staring judgmentally or laughing at his misery as things fade into darkness. Patrick later emerges from the depths, now covered in crimson liquid, as his victims' ghosts stand in place with cloth over their faces. Fairly creepy, alright, but it gets worse when red and blue lights are seen flashing through the curtains and a police officer bangs on the door. The corpses begin howling as the cops are looking through the window, while the most recent visitor, which is actually his first victim, pours the rest of the GHB container into his alcohol before sliding him the bottle. The howls now become a chant from the ghost crowd, all telling him to drink over and over again as the banging from police intensifies at his door. As Patrick grabs the bottle, the visitor makes sure to pour its entire contents down his throat. All at once, the nightmare ends, and we see Patrick sitting alone in his trailer, drinking away his troubles during a calm and quiet night. Was all of that just a dream? Well, not all of it, as he holds the empty container of GHB in his hand. He really did drink it, and his life is actually about to end. But coming to this realization that everything this night was just a guilt-driven madness-induced dream from all his past actions. The man can only laugh at the trick his mind played on himself before collapsing on the floor. Could anyone have survived this night? Well, for each of the victims involved, they should have practiced more caution when it comes to dealing with strangers. Not going to blame any of them though for reaching out for help or trying to meet new people, but it is vital to do these things as safely as possible and always be on guard for any potential threat. Doing so could have kept most alive. For Patrick himself, yes, we're going to try and help everyone here. He should have turned himself in long ago. Not sure what caused him to start these murders in the first place, but he clearly did feel guilty about them despite his denial of that little voice in the back of his head. This denial drove him to insanity and eventually to taking his own life. Had he simply come clean about things, it would have saved his mental and physical well-being as well as several other victims that he could have avoided meeting. I know it's strange advice telling someone to turn themselves over for the wrongs they did, but honestly, holding on to any sort of negative feelings like this will always lead to a worsening outcome. It's best to get guilt, worry, and regret off our chest in the most direct way possible, as letting these things fester will only damage our life further and potentially bring down the lives of those around us, like with the visitors that came to Patrick here. So, were you able to figure out which character to trust before the big reveal? Honestly, I was hoping that both would turn out to be innocent, and the moral of the story would be not letting our fears prevent us from trusting. Look where that got me. Still, Patrick's actions seem like an unnecessary subversion of expectations just for a more shocking ending. Missed potential if you ask me, but not a bad film overall because of it. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, guys. Binge another one and peace out.